Hello, welcome to my study. This is Tanya Bennett, your instructor. Today we're going to talk about structuring your essay. There are good resources for how to do this. Of course, some typical structures are the classical structure and the Rogerian structure. For academic writing, those work particularly well. You have also had experience with the 5-paragraph essay, but since this is a longer essay, a longer project, I'm going to encourage you to break away from that structure because it does not reflect the complexity of most issues. If you have 3 main points that you want to make, often you discuss them almost as a list, and what is often ignored is their relationships to one another. So now that you are immersed in your subject matter and you have some ideas about what you want to say, you understand that your thesis is sophisticated, sort of complex, and that the 5-paragraph essay probably doesn't fit your needs. So today we're going to work through just some ideas for determining a structure for your essay, and different students may use different structures depending on what they're trying to do. Don't forget that every essay has a purpose, and the writer needs to know exactly what that purpose is. I'm suggesting that you think of it this way. What do you want your audience, which is your classmates and I in this case, what do you want your audience to think or do as a result of reading your essay? So your essay should persuade us to think or do that, okay? So the way I normally write, and the way I would encourage anyone to write, because usually we have a lot of notes, or we still have the ideas in our head and they're just kind of all over the place, right? And sometimes there are ideas there that don't need to be included in your essay, even though they're really good ideas. So, as I have suggested earlier this semester, you will need to brainstorm or free write first. I tend to brainstorm. I'll take a sheet of paper and I'll just write down all the things that are in my head around this project. I just sort of write it as it comes. I don't try to make it into any sort of order. I had one student say that he prefers just to write, I call this free writing, where it looks more like maybe a journal entry. It's in sentences. So when I brainstorm, I'm just writing ideas, a few words, one word maybe, a name, and I'm just going down it in list format. When I'm free writing, I tend to write more like I'm writing in a diary or something. I'm just sort of writing sentences as they come to me. So either way is fine. When you finish doing that, you want to go back and sort of look at what you have and try to organize it, right? And first, sometimes you have to figure out what are the key ideas that I have here and what are the subordinate ideas. What are the things that I would use to support the key ideas? Are there ideas here that I don't need to put in this essay? And remember how long your essay is supposed to be. Sometimes the idea is so good you want to put it in there, but it really doesn't help you achieve this purpose, so you can save it for another project, for maybe another paper. So I have come up with an outline that it looks typical of something I would write. Your outlines may look a little bit different than this, but I'm going to show you this outline, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the key concepts that I want you to remember as you're doing your own structure for your paper. So this symbol right here, this little weird like backwards P with 2 lines through it, is the symbol for paragraph. So you're going to see how even though I'm sort of coming up with key points and I'm numbering those, out to the side I'm also thinking about what paragraphs I would use to do this. So as you can see, I suggested that in the introduction you include a brief background of your issue, give the reader some orientation. Why are we talking about this? And then make sure you include your thesis. Now, the thesis that I'm using in the sample is this. Increasing arts and corrections programs would improve prison culture and decrease recidivism. So I'm claiming that it does two things, and I'm wanting my reader to embrace the possibility of having more arts and corrections programs. I'm trying to persuade people that that's a good idea. Okay? So the first section here is the studies that show, I'm going to try to prove that these programs actually would have the effect that I say they're having. In the first subsection, I would talk about how they decrease violence, and I would try to give some proof of that, some research showing that that's true. In the second subsection, I'll show how they decrease depression and anxiety for prisoners and give some research on that. From there, I moved to studies that show that programs improve recidivism rates. So I'm moving into a new section there. So one is prison culture, the other is recidivism, which is the rates at which people return to prison, as we've talked about. So I decided to move my opposition paragraph closer to the end of the essay this time, because after talking about all the great things that arts programs do, I am going to assume that some of my readers will still be a little worried about how much all of this is going to cost. So there I decided in point number 3 to talk about the costs, and I want to talk about how much they are. I want to acknowledge, in other words, concede to my opposition that yes, this is going to be an expense. But then I want to counter, I want to reassure my reader with the notion that the long-term costs, the long-term benefits will outweigh the short-term costs. Finally, I'm thinking for my essay to bring a human face to this issue and provide some more persuasion. I want to use the example of Spoon Jackson to show that he did make the kind of transformation that I've described above, and that he went on to serve basically free of charge the prison and society at large by writing poetry and teaching his own workshops, so that he became a contributing member, a productive member of society. And then I would have my conclusion. Now, let's talk about the paragraphs just a little bit. So if you go and look at the places where I have circles with a paragraph sign and a number there, I'm thinking that I'm going to want to break it down this way. So I should end up with 7 paragraphs. Now, for a 4-page paper, however long, somewhere in that range that this paper will be, that's not a bad idea. It may be that once I start writing, I need to break one of these paragraphs down into 2 paragraphs. Maybe I will need to talk about 2 different studies. Let's say that I'm on point number 1, where I'm talking about decreases in violence. Maybe I have 2 different studies that talk about that, and I want to spend a little bit of time on each study. Not just mention them, but really talk about what was found in each of the 2 studies, because maybe they were kind of different and maybe they brought a lot of light to this issue. So maybe I want to break that down into 2 paragraphs on how arts programs decrease violence. So I could do that. I could shift my outline a little bit and split that into 2. One of the main things, so we talked a little bit about paragraphing and why sometimes we need to break down an idea into more paragraphs. You guys said in class that one thing about paragraphing is that you don't want the reader to get lost halfway through and wonder, now wait a minute, what were we talking about again? What was the topic sentence here? And and when you do shift to a new paragraph, you sort of bring attention to the shift. So if you have a second study, on decreasing violence, you don't want it to get lost in the long discussion of the first study. So maybe you want to shift to a new paragraph to say, here's another important study that I want you to take note of. For each of these paragraphs, this is something I want to remind you of that you learned probably maybe elementary or middle school, and I think it's easy to sort of, as you get more sophisticated in your writing, sort of forget some of these simple principles. Every paragraph should begin with a clear topic sentence. The topic sentence should not only forecast what this paragraph is going to be about, but it should also tie us back to the thesis. So an example would be in this section on decreasing violence, you might have a topic sentence that would say something like, one benefit of increasing arts programs in prisons is that they have a mitigating effect on violence. Okay, so I'm tying it back to the idea of increasing the number of arts programs in prisons, and I'm forecasting that we're about to hear about the ways that those programs decrease violence. So don't forget, if you're not putting those topic sentences in there, there's a chance that the overall coherence, unity, and organization of your essay is suffering. Your reader appreciates it greatly when you give them little signposts about a turn that we're making. Otherwise, we're trying to guess what it is that it's about to happen or what is happening. So those topic sentences are really important. After you've written your whole essay, go back and look at your thesis and your topic sentences and make sure that this outline has been honored, that it's clear. If I wanted to go outline your paper, I could quickly do it by looking at the thesis and the topic sentences. Okay, so as you work, if you have questions about how you're going to want to organize your ideas, you can let me know, but hopefully this short lesson will help. Thanks. Happy writing!